like to call this workshop to order. And let me note that Mary called me and said that she's going to be a little late. She doesn't get off till after 5. But we do have a quorum. And with that, I would ask Dr. Aguilar, do you have any opening remarks?
Just a general comment about the weather situation today. I wanted the board members to know we have been monitoring the weather situation constantly during the day today. We were in contact with meteorologists and our colleagues in other parishes, and so we closely watched the situation. My impression is there was a tiny slice of really regular rain that came through, and we were in that band, and we were fortunate, but I want you to know we had the best interest of all kids at heart. Keeping them in school was the right decision today. Thank you.
Any comments from any members of the board? Sure.
If I could, I'd like to mention to not only the public but my fellow board members, I was invited to Prairie today by Miss Taylor. She's a counselor. In fact, they tell me she told me her husband, Major Taylor, I think is employed with the school system. For Black History Month, they did a museum, and I was invited to tour it. And if anybody would like to go past it, Prairie is their first year. If anybody maybe has anything they'd like to donate to Miss Taylor, it was very impressive what they put on today. And if I could mention, Saturday night at Tad Gormley Stadium at 7:30 p.m., Acadiana Wrecking Rams will play for the state title in soccer boys. And they're looking for any help they can get. So if you want to help Acadiana High, this will be their 5th trip in school history to the state finals. They're 2-2. They have 2 state championships and 2 runners-up. Very proud of them. Want to tell them congratulations. And as always, once a Ram, always a Ram.
Thank you, Mr. Latchley. I'm surprised you don't have your forest green shirt on this afternoon.
My wife picked this shirt out, and that's why I'm wearing it.
Okay, without any further ado, I'd like to turn this workshop over to Mr. Guidry. Billy.
Okay, we'll be reviewing each of the proposed budgets. These are all of the budgets other than the general fund and self-insured fund. And when we get to the calendar, we'll review the next set of workshops. And once we're done with the review of the calendar, it'll basically give everyone an idea of the entire budget process from start to finish with regards to proposed dates. The first proposed budget is that of the 2016-17 Special Revenue Fund. And the comment I'd like to make here before opening it up for any board questions, board member questions, would be our original budget is always based on the allocations or the awards of the current fiscal year, unless we have received an award letter for the 16-17 year. Award letters don't typically come in this early, so that would be more the exception than the rule. When the award letters, when we do receive the allocations and award letters, we'll come back and revise the adopted budget once it's adopted to reflect the actual award letters for 16-17. So majority of these numbers are based on the current award letters. So with that, I would ask or open it up for any questions from board members.
Mr. Broussard.
Mr. Guidry, I'm strolling down to the extended school year program. Is that the 20 days that we're looking for? Are those the ones, or we're going to offer that to all the schools, or just the schools that are?
The extended year program is a a special ed program. It's a IDEA funded. It's federally funded. So it's a program different than the one that you're inquiring
It's
about.
different from what we started out in beginning of the year to have an extended day for the kids.
Right. That particular program will come up during our discussion of the proposed general fund budget.
If there are no other questions, Mr. Guidry can move on.
Okay. I'll just need a minute to get to the next budget on my laptop. The next proposed budget is that of the 2016-17 Construction Fund 2012 Limited Tax Bond Fund. And basically, this particular fund reflects the fact that we have one project that remains before we close the fund out. That project is that of Lafayette High renovations. It's the conclusion or completion of that particular project. That project, if you recall, covered restroom renovations and additions to the auditorium for band, chorus, and color guard storage. So in the next fiscal year, we will be complete. We'll be done with expending all of these limited tax bond funds, as well as being complete with all the projects that were approved by the board. Any questions?
Go ahead.
The next proposed budget is the 2016-17 Capital Improvement Fund budget. What I'd like to mention here is just the process that we go through. The process begins with sending out capital request forms to all schools and cost center supervisors. And then these forms are returned, first of all, signed not only by the principal, but by the director of middle and high schools or director of elementary schools, depending on which signature, whose signature is required. Then it goes to Mr. Bordelon for him to sign off on as well. Goes onto an inventory listing, and then we sit down with the superintendent and prioritize and select those to include in the proposed budget. So with that said, I would ask if there are any questions with regards to the Capital Improvement Fund proposed budget.
Mr. Centeni?
To get on one of our favorite whipping boys here, the new portable leases, acquisitions, and setup section appears to be roughly about $700,000. Is there, what process did staff go through to try to, I guess, reduce the number of relocations, the number of current leases, and things of that nature? That number is just it's a historical number based on what we've experienced. We set it at an amount that puts us in a position of hopefully not having to come back to the board and ask for additional funds. So it's not to say that we have planned on moving that many buildings. It's more or less just to facilitate if there's a need to move that many buildings. And that would be it may be a move from one school site to another, or it may be a move to send it back to the lease company. So it would include both types.
Mr. Latchley, are you done, Mr. Latchley?
Just a quick question. David Thibodeau, lighting soccer and track and baseball field. Is that lighting the soccer and track area and building a baseball field, or is that lighting the baseball field also?
This is for a lighting project for those areas, for those athletic facilities.
Okay, I guess just a question. As far as lighting the baseball fields at David Thibodeau, we have 5 other high schools that don't have lighted baseball or softball fields. Just kind of wondering how we came about this decision to light a baseball field.
I believe that request was for the soccer field only,
Okay,
as I recall
that's why I
the
was just
request.
asking, because I can promise you the phone calls are going to start tomorrow. Thank you.
Understood.
Thank you.
Change that.
Go ahead, Mr. Guidry.
Sure. Any other questions with regards to the capital improvements fund? Okay. The next proposed budget is that of the 2016-17 self-funded construction. Again, we take those same capital requests and those that whose funding source would be that of the self-funded construction fund. It goes through that same process I mentioned earlier, and we have the projects listed in this proposed budget. I would ask if there are any questions with regards to information presented in the proposed budget.
Hearing none, we'll move on.
The next fund is the proposed budget for the 2016-17 debt service fund. I would ask that you would turn to the second page, if we can get it up on the screen. It's a more detailed analysis of how the funds are spent. We'll give Ms. Reshort a minute to get there. Okay, and basically, this particular fund presents the proposed budget for all of our debt service for the school district. I would ask if, and you can see in this more detailed schedule, it breaks it out by the different types of bonds or debt that we have outstanding. I'd ask if there are any questions with regards to the proposed budget for the debt service fund.
Yes, sir, Mr. Centeni.
Is one of these expenditures take into account the bonds we anticipate selling this year to build the new high school?
We will come back with a budget revision once we're done with that process. We're hoping that our attempts to obtain USDA funding will be successful. But until we actually go through the process, we weren't certain if we would be budgeting for USDA debt service or for just an outright bond sale. So we'll come back with a budget revision once we finalize that
I know
process.
that application was on the bond commission's agenda. Do we have a time frame for knowing when we'll have that estimate?
I would expect that if the USDA application is successful, that we're probably looking at April or May, where we would have those numbers. And if for some reason we go through the process and we come to the conclusion that we need to go out to the open market, then that would probably push it back another 6 to 8 weeks. So we'd know something probably along the lines of July. So depending on which course of action we take, either April or May for the USDA, and probably July if it was an open market, because the reason for that is we wouldn't start our efforts there until we would determine that USDA it's not the way that we're going to go. But so far we're moving along in that USDA application process.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
The next budget is the proposed budget for the 2016-17 sales tax fund. What I'd like to mention here is that
the budget assumption that we used was a 7% decrease from current year collections. So if you recall, back in December, the board approved a budget revision which was based on the budget assumption that we would recognize by the end of the year, we would be at about an 8% decrease overall. So in the budget, we're providing for an additional 7% over and above that 8%. So I just wanted to share with the board that particular budget assumption. To the general fund, it'll mean about 5.3 million less. Overall, it'll mean about a $17 million reduction to the entire school district. That's where we are with regards to this, the assumptions that we use in preparing this. I would ask if there's any questions from the board members.
Mr. Knizik?
Mr. Yidger, do you think that's conservative enough? If we had an 8% dip year-to-date?
We were thinking, our thought process was, given the fact that a good bit of these funds are distributed to the general fund, and recognizing the fact that we have quite a chore ahead of us in balancing the general fund, our thought process was to be careful not to understate it, but at the same time not to overstate it. Because if we overstate it, then it would indicate the need for additional cuts in the general fund. So we thought that 7% would position us such that if we were too conservative, and it's more like it ends up being more like 8, 9, or 10%, it wouldn't be a huge amount for us to have to deal with when we become aware of it. If it comes in at a lesser amount, 5, 4, or 3, then by the same token, we would not have made significant cuts that may not have been necessary based on these sales tax assumptions. So that was the thought process. Which way it's going to go, we really don't have a good feel for it, but we feel that it positions us one way or the other. We may have to adjust it upward, but I would hope that it would not be beyond 10%.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
The next proposed budget is that for the 2016-17 School Food Service Fund. For this particular budget, straightforward with regards to the budget process. There were no significant changes with regards to any of the budget assumptions. Some slight changes in the revenues that are explained in the footnotes, and with a balanced budget being proposed, total revenues over expenses of break even in this particular budget. One of the things I wanted to call to the board's attention is that proposed balanced budget does not require an increase in the MFP and other state pass-through. That is a line item, the second to last line item in revenues. And what that line item represents is if the school food service funds does finish with a deficit, then that amount would have to be increased to cover it so that we can balance the budget. And that transfer actually comes from the general fund. So I was pleased to see that particular department is looking at a balanced budget without requiring any additional funds from the general fund. I'd ask if there are any questions from board members.
Okay.
The next proposed budget is that for the 2016-17 2002 half-cent sales tax fund. Of course, this fund receives its distribution from the previous proposed sales tax budget, so it only follows that the revenues reflect a 7% decrease since, in essence, that budget assumption was used in computing the combined sales tax collections.
So that is what the proposed budget reflects. Budget revenues of $23.1 million, a shortfall of about $1 million. Of course, we have fund balance to cover that, with a proposed ending fund balance that's still adequate to cover the $6 million reserve, as well as the two reserves that we maintain for the two $1,000 increases, one that was given in 2010 and the other in 2015. I would ask if there are any questions with regards to this proposed budget.
Go ahead.
Mis-
I'm sorry.
Mr. Gidger, do you anticipate it looks like you don't anticipate an excess reserve distribution to the teachers in 16-17?
That is going to be a board decision, of course, when we get the actual results for the 15-16 school year. We'll come back with a presentation to the board. This is what we would be looking at, Mr. Knezik. The $13.5 million proposed fund balance in the third column, about 3/4 of the way down. If you back out $6 million, which is the estimated cost of the two $1,000 increases, we always try to have 1 year ahead of us. You back out the $6 million, which is a reserve that was established when, to help address downturns in the economy. That would leave you with, let's see, 6, 12, about $1.5 million roughly. So at that point, it becomes a decision as to what we anticipate 17-18 would look like. Do we hold on to that $1.5 million to address a potential an additional decrease in sales tax collections in 17-18? And as we move further along, hopefully we will have a better feel as to how things are going. So when we get to that point, we'll present the information. Right now, I would say that it would be on hold until we see how sales tax collections turn out, actual sales tax collections.
Dr. Aguilar, I think it'd be a good idea to notify the recipients that traditionally receive an excess reserve distribution that's significant, that it's highly likely that with the proposed budget for next year and the way the economy is, that they may not receive any excess reserve distribution. And if they do receive one, it may be significantly less than what they traditionally get.
Yes, sir. I think we can send out a letter indicating where we are with this anticipated budget.
Right. I think it's important that they know now, so that when the time comes, it's not necessarily the board making a decision to not give something that they had before, but just a reality of the times.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Guidry?
The next budget is that of the proposed budget for 2016-17, 2016 construction fund. This particular budget, we took a look at, is based on the projected cash flows needed with regards to the $126 million of projects on that project listing. So for the 16-17 school year, we're projecting that we would need about $63.8 million. And the reason why we went ahead and budgeted this piece of it and not the debt service piece of it is we're going to be starting construction soon, so we need to have a budget in place in order to facilitate that. The debt service side is not as critical because we'll have some time to make that first payment. So that's the reason why we budgeted the expenditure side and not the proceeds side. Any questions with regards to this particular construction fund? Again, this construction fund relates to the $126 million of projects that the board approved a couple of months ago.
Mr. Centeni?
I'm always interested in learning how this process works. So we're planning on having the high school open in August of 17, and the fiscal year ends June 30th of 17. So why is the 45 and a half not a bigger number for this coming fiscal year?
It's my understanding that the school will be at a point where we can take the students in, but there will be continuing construction beyond that opening date.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Guidry?
The last item is that of the budget recap and timeline. Of course, we have the first meeting is that meeting of tonight. The next meeting that's scheduled is April 26th. At that point, we'll be presenting to the board both the group insurance fund, the proposed budget for the group insurance fund, as well as the general fund. You notice for the general fund, we have all of the cost centers grouped, the 1100 series, 1200 series, all the way through the 1500 series. We have a May 3rd optional meeting in the event that the board would, we're not done with the discussion from the 26th. As well, and if that one's not needed, then we would wrap it up on May 10th. So we have two meetings that are actually scheduled. We have one that's holding place for our third one, and if we don't need the one for the 10th, then of course we would just remove or cancel that particular meeting. May 18th, we would come back with all of the funds one more time. For the board to review. All of those presented this evening, all of those that will be presented on April 26th through May 10th for comments, because at that point, we're going to request that the board approve that the staff proceed with the budget adoption process. If that's the case, once we proceed with the budget adoption process, historically, we have tried to make no changes to the budget. Of course, unless something comes up during the public inspection period, not in public inspection, public hearing, where maybe someone from the community makes a point that the board wants to incorporate into the budget. But short of that, we try to complete the budget process with what is presented once we advertise and put it out for public inspection. So on May 25th and 26th, we would advertise that it's available, that all of the proposed budgets, not adopted, but proposed budgets are available for public inspection. On June 8th, we would have a public hearing at 4 p.m. to allow the community to comment on either or all of these budgets, followed by a special board meeting at 4:30 to adopt the budget, which would mean if we are able to adhere to this calendar, and we have made changes in the past just depending on the process and availability of board members. We've done a pretty good job of adhering to the calendar, but that would mean that we'd have an adopted budget by June 8th. And if we're successful in doing that, I would like to say that that's 2 weeks sooner than the shortest adoption period we've had in the previous 9 years. So if we're able to accomplish that, I think that would be a very positive thing with regards to this adoption process, a whole 2 weeks earlier than the best we've done in the prior 9 years. Just an added bit of information. Any questions with regards to the budget timeline?
I have a question. Mr. Guidry, so you don't foresee any meetings relative to the budget between now and April 26th?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. Anybody have any comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Was that the last one, Mr. Guidry?
Yes, sir.
But if there's no questions or any more comments, we'll declare this public informational workshop adjourned.
Thank you very much.